for last 2 days, we have been listening to such intriguing discussions. And most of us agree that how self-discovery and self-transformation, as you were saying, ma'am, helps us to look at the life in a better way and, outpace the situations or problems we are in. So to go with the title of my topic, it says applying biometa for integrating practical mysticism into philosophical counseling. Since the focus of this conference is philosophical counseling through Indian philosophy or Indian perspective, talking about India and not talking about spirituality or mysticism, I guess won't be an idea. When we are publish philosophical counseling into Indian thought, I think that's important to first understand what spirituality or what mysticism is not, how it's different from occult practices, alchemies, and pseudo spirituality, maybe, or some quick remedies for the attainment. So I think the land that produced numerous spiritual giants who acknowledged, experienced, and transformed into that which represents Tattva in Tattva Jnana and Darshana in Darshan Shastra, and some spiritual supergiants who went a step ahead and rationalized this realization as mysticism, whose writings are not poetic fancies or just play of words, but an expression of, I quote, that attitude of mind which involves a direct, immediate, first-hand, and intuitive apprehension of God, which defines mysticism according to Professor R.D. Ranade. So here I'm considering these leaders of spirituality, the very famous pair, as we all know, Ramakrishna, Paramhansa, and Vivekananda, and Professor R.D. Ranade. So we all know about Ramakrishna and Vivekananda. I don't think we need some introduction of them. Also, Professor Ranade, their contemporary, boy from a remote place in South India with a scientific bent from his childhood, began with a hypothesis, experimented, and then verified his philosophy of rational mysticism to quench the thirst of intellectuals and critics. Devotedly called as Gurudev by his followers, Professor Ranade led the University of Allahabad as the department head of philosophy and later as the vice chancellor. His writings are the manifestations of his spiritual activism that shows his urge for raising the thinking humanity into the divine kingdom of ends, in his words. In the year 1896, Swami Vivekananda delivered 2 lectures in the New York. Therein, what he conveyed is still relevant after some 125 years. So he said, today, man requires one more adjustment on the spiritual plane. Today, when man is likely to forget his divine nature through his growing dependence on matter and is likely to be reduced to a money-making machine, well, these days, machines working from home, an adjustment is necessary. The voice has spoken and the power is coming to drive away the clouds of gathering materialism. So we are all living in such an advanced world today, where in terms of technology, sciences, or social media platforms, where the self-help book sales or the subscriptions to the channels and pages of spirituality are rapidly raising. And irrespective of the COVID times, mental problems are always there. Existential questions, spiritual concerns, all this was always there. And when we end up in the feeling of depression or sadness, loneliness, or some discouragements or disconcertments, helplessness, all these feelings, I don't think necessarily make us a weak human, but are very much like the incentives that set an inquiry into the self. Also, Dr. Ranade calls this. Dr. Ranade says that if such a person is already willingly seeking a spiritual ideal, these conditions become the incentives that move him rightly in the direction of God. So this was my whole point, to consider these thinkers And often we are told that mysticism is considered something ineffable, indescribable, and the kind of joy which words cannot words fail to describe. So how can this be brought into the vocation of counseling, where we need to speak, engage the client in discussions? But I think, though this realization at such a high extent is ineffable, sages and mystic philosophers, in their highest state of consciousness and intuition, cascaded such experiences into their writings. And the universality in their mystical expressions make this phenomenon a rationally valid philosophy. So, um, so that's why, considering the writings of these mystics, but in a way which will be more believable, more adaptable, and acceptable to the client, who is generally a non-philosopher, who is generally a non-thinker, and is not used to think deeply like how we philosophy people do, maybe. So, uh, personally, I always wondered how would, when we read about detachment and treating pleasures and pains equally, I personally wondered how would such a person look like in real life? How would such a sthita prajna would behave? What would this phenomenon look like when it's enacted? But when I read an incident about Lokmanya Tilak, on the occasion of his 60th birthday, the relatives and everyone was gathered for the celebration. But Lokmanya Tilak received a summons from the Bombay High Court. Obviously, everyone was disheartened with this news, and Tilak was about to get arrested on this happy occasion. But Tilak exclaimed, "So the government too sent me a present. So what?" So I would like to leave this part open for interpretation. What happens, in my view, that the writings, what these mystics or what these thinkers, uh, who wandered in, who were like this denizens of dual lands, who wandered in the spiritual realm, but also they were there for us to translate and deliver the message for the mundane world. So their writings, their concepts are, not that absorbable for ordinary people. But biographical stories or charitra kathas, letters, diaries are also direct reflections of one's mind. And the core philosophies can be grasped better by referring to such supporting materials. And who doesn't like listening to stories? So, in my opinion, what others did influence our thoughts and may inspire us to act at times. So, in the counselor-counselee conversation, the bio method, which includes narration, discussion, and contemplation of biographical literature like life events, diaries, letters, and reminiscences written by and of such mystics, will help those who seek peace, stability, happiness, and a balanced relationship with themselves. Self realization, spiritual experiences, meditation, dhyana occur at a very progressive stage. They come, very later, and indeed need a very good bent of temperament, likewise. But this process starts with an awareness that imposes scrutiny on human conditions, mind, conduct, identity. So, for ordinary people like us and worldly people like us, a little deviation is enough that encourages us to introspect. The stories of these spiritual personalities have answers for those who love the idea of God, but there is more for those who wish to just observe and understand the nature of their conditions, sufferings, and problems. In the work Real Worship, Vivekananda tells us the miseries of the world cannot be cured by physical help only until man's nature changes. These physical needs will always arise. Let man have light. Let them be pure and spiritually strong. And then alone will misery cease in the world and not before. So I feel their stories and the narration of their life events also can act like a double-edged sword that inspires agnostics and aspirants both. I would like to note here that my sincere thanks to Dr. Bala Ganapati for suggesting the term biomethod. So thank you, Dr. Bala sir. What role the counselor plays here? It is a very good thing for the counselee that he or she comes upon his own to seek help and seek advices. And in such a setting where the counselor analyzes counseling situation from a third person standpoint, here the counselor needs to help the client to execute the same attitude in dealing with his or her issues. If one can picture his circumstances carefully from a non-personal perspective, they may look more manageable. We fail to do so because we are directly connected to the characters in our story, and we often define ourselves on these terms. So I believe it's a two-way process for the counselor and the counselee. And also, when the counselor who was talking about such mystics, such I would call Jagat Gurus, global teachers, I don't think it will be creditable for the counselor to take the role of the guru. Rather, he or she would be just a conveyor of what they have for us. Also, the counselor bears a significant responsibility as a conveyor, especially while talking about such spiritual personalities. And the counselor should attend these thinkers persistently to be able to narrate their charitakas and extract philosophy through these glimpses. Once Vivekananda wrote a letter to one of his disciples, Kiddy. He wrote, "Pass the cup that has satisfied your thirst." Likewise, this work is a humble venture, for me to pass these spiritual renderings by these powerful personalities to the intelligent audience. If we can see some examples of what I mean by discussion of biomethods, then I have something of some writings or some collections from Kathamrita. I hope my voice is audible and stable. I guess I'm facing some internet issues.
Your
am
voice
I audible properly?
Yes, you're audible.
Okay, thank you. Okay,
so, thank you.
Is it over? No, ma'am, I'm about to complete.
Okay,
I just need some 2-3 minutes more. Is it fine?
Okay, no problem.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So, few days ago on 12th January, the birth anniversary of Vivekananda was there. So I think it would be really a tribute for him to talk about his guru and about him. So I've collected some writings, some extracts from Kathamrita, that is the condensed gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, which is the collection of memories of Ramakrishna Paramhansa engaging with his disciples in candid conversations. So when one of the disciples asked him why problems in life occur, his reply was, "It is so difficult to get rid of the sense of I, which puts a barrier in the way of Brahmadhyana. You dream of a tiger, you tremble in every limb, your heart throbs violently. You wake up to find that it was mere a dream. But all the same, in your waking state, your heart goes throbbing. That being the case, the sense of I refuses to leave. What should be done then? Why let it have the sole limiting agent or upadhi? Let it stay on as the servant of Lord. But I and mine of the worldly men is the ignorance leading away from the God." Also, he said, working without attachment, however, is exceedingly difficult in this age. The fact that one must have true knowledge or love of God, hence, it is our duty as imperfect men to find out, if possible, the shortest path that leads to God. Let us do the duty that is nearest to us. Let us bring down our work to a minimum by earnest prayer and self-surrender. So removing the sense of I-ness, definitely it does sound very difficult to practice in real life. That's what Ramakrishna is telling us. Also, the surgeon first anesthetizes the patient's body before making the incision. So likewise, if we just need some anesthesia for ourselves, But when we face the problems with families or with friends and partners, which eventually lead to very toxic relationships, what are we doing? We are constantly, they are constantly the subject of our thoughts and emotions. So the mental connection of that person with them gets also stronger. Ramakrishna points out exactly this trait of mind to connect easily, and advises us to connect it with God or a higher entity to escape from the prick and avoid the weeping later. Taking the attention away from our circumstances is not an easy deal, but surrender, faith, devotion can support. And he also assures that yearnings and prayers coming from the helpless hearts are always answered. So, developing the Atmanatma Viveka or Vairagya, these are the virtues which also Bhagavad Gita identifies. But how they can be practiced is, I think, it's a very different deal. So, where does this source of strength, what is the source of strength? Where does this strength to think non-personally comes from? What other ways to shift our mind in such situations then? Saints tell us to, listening along with contemplating will slowly improve your actions. Saint Ramdas in his Granth Dasbodh says that Shravani Kriya Balate. So meditative listening helps to improve our actions. And Dr. Ranade also followed this Shravana, Manana, and Chintana religiously wherever he stayed. He used to spend hours in meditation. Apart from that, he used to engage in discussions of letters and notes of his spiritual teachers, songs of saints, along with his fellow devotees. So, when he was having one such sitting at his house, he asked one sadhaka, the fellow, to sing the bhajan of Saint Suradasa, and the devotee. The bhajan is about all about the grace of God and how it strengthens us. So the devotee started singing, Sur Kishore Kripa se sab bal हारे को हरि नाम सुन रे मन निर्बल के बलराम. So sunare mana nirbal ke balaram. Unless we realize our absolute importance before the majestic power of God, it may not be possible for God's grace to descend upon us. It is the grace of God which supersedes any other source of strength which man may fondly cling in his heart, as Dr. Ranade translates it. And also, the song narrates many mythological, historical stories of the Gajendra Moksha, the liberation of Gajendra, Draupadi Vastraharan. But it may not be believable, for maybe a people of my age, like who has seen these people. So, if we wish to talk about persistent faith in modern times, in our times, through modern stories which are believable and acceptable, let us take a look at a recent story. At the age of 23, Dr. Ranade developed brain tuberculoma, which has hardly any cure even today in medical sciences. When the treatment he was getting from the best doctors in Pune showed no signs of improvement, he sought the company of his master and devotees. With his unshakable devotion and meditation on the name of God, he slowly started gaining better health. I am not promoting any unwise practices or occultism, and I'm no way I'm saying that stop taking medicines and just meditate. No, it is difficult. What I mean to, or what I intend to say here, that the importance of spiritual virtues or practice of meditation, sheer faith, and the power of atmosphere around us, the company of devotees, may help us to become stronger. In his book Reflections, Randhari also tells us a very different kind of mental exercise when we are often told in positive or happy moments. When we are often told to think of positive and happy moments when we face any negative or unhappy circumstances like death of a dear one, to think of joyous moments, think of that person, how you spend time with them and all. But The same process follows inversely if a person wishes a binding calmness. So Ranade tells us the real Sthitaprajna, or the real one who wishes to treat pleasures and pain equally, you need to think upstream at instances. You need to think upstream by choices at instances of both joys and sorrows. So we can relate this with the concept of Sthita Prajna in Bhagavad Gita, and also the Stoicism, which encourages this teaching. And mind controlling is not a 1 or 2 day activity, but it's a part of everyday living that a seeker can eventually learn to employ. The scope of this method, such type of discussion, I think it goes very close to biblical counseling in a way, partially. Narration of Charitra Kathas, diaries, and letters and minor works of thinkers, which I considered just now, work as supporting tools. The counselor can select for comprehension depending upon the temperament of the client. Also, his method is most advisable in spiritual and religious concerns, lifestyle changes, mental disorders, and even suicidal issues at a minor level. Also, existential questions about the meanings of life and death and interpersonal conflicts. Introducing practical mysticism to those who willingly want to improve themselves is a kind of existential coaching, is a process-oriented counseling, and not a very immediate or solution-oriented counseling. There are limitations. If a client is reluctant to the idea of spirituality and cannot even stand the word God, this method will be challenging for the counselor to engage the client in such concepts like mysticism. And a good counselor should present such content according to the temperament of the listener, as I said. Hence, the bio method can be separately coupled with other concepts in philosophy to suit the client. Discussing practical mysticism also won't be suitable for children because in yesterday's presentation, Dr. Ashwini Kumar said that children don't need such things because they are already very meditative and they are already engaged in meditative activities. Also, it would not be applicable for patients who are taking any clinical treatments or who are taking any medicines and drugs like for brain disorders, mental disorders, but it can be coupled parallelly, can be conducted parallelly to psychological counseling and psychotherapy. So in closing, I think it's very high time for us to ask ourselves, what are we exactly looking for? Are we looking for happiness, love, satisfaction, peace, and truth at all the wrong places? Because COVID has it has reinforced. We need to reinforce our thresholds, and COVID has tested us to think at the root values and contemplate on higher values. So when we are on the verge of establishing a new way of studying philosophy for ourselves and for others in India, I recollect the words of Professor Ranade in the essay Vindication of India. He said, "What a glorious prospect lies before India. I see India flinging away superstitions, sloth, and intellectual inertia. I see her taking up the scientific spirit and the energy of Europe. I see her assimilating the excellences of both the East and the West, and rising the scale of modern nations, preserving all the while the integrity and pristine purity of her spiritual self." So with this, I conclude my presentation. Thank you for your question. Thank you for listening.